Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Welcome from all time zones in the world to the 2025 IAMSCU Research University Symposium. It is a pleasure to welcome everyone today. This year's symposium, titled The Legacy of John Franklin Goucher, A Global Vision for Christian Education, celebrates the extraordinary contributions of John Franklin Goucher as an educator, missionary, and philanthropist. His influence continues to resonate across the institutions he helped to establish and the lives he impacted globally. John Goucher was also one of the visionary founders of IAMSCU, so this symposium also commemorates the 150th anniversary of the founding of IAMSCU. Today, we are honored to hear from distinguished speakers who will share their insights on Goucher's remarkable legacy and its enduring relevance. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to a thought-provoking and meaningful event. To begin, I would like to invite Reverend Satoru Ito, Dean of Religion at IAMSCU, to open the symposium with prayer.
Okay, let us pray. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Ito. Next, we have greetings from two esteemed leaders. First, we'll hear from Chancellor Yoshiharu Yamamoto of IAMSCU. Chancellor Yamamoto is also a member of the IAMSCU Board of Directors.
はい、自動翻訳が素晴らしいので、私の英語よりも翻訳の方がいいのかもしれませんけども、英語で、挨拶しています。It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to 10th annual IAMSCU Research University Symposium. On behalf of Aoyama Gakuin, I extend my gratitude to all participants as well as to IAMSCU, Upper May, and related schools for their close cooperation in making this event possible. This year's symposium is part of the 150th anniversary celebration of Aoyama Gakuin founding. As we remember our school history, we cannot overstate this importance of John Franklin Goucher, a man whose vision and generosity played such a key role in shaping our school. Through his dedication to education, faith, and global engagement, Goucher exemplified the values and mission that continue to guide Aoyama Gakuin today. I would like to thank the speakers who have joined us to share this insight into Goucher life and legacy. Your contribution will deep our understanding of his impact both here in Japan and around the world. Once again, thank you all for your participation in this special event. May today's discussion inspire us as we continue to pursue this vision of education that Goucher personality championed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Yamamoto. Next, we have greetings from Reverend Dr. Young-Ming Pike, professor at Yonsei University, member of the APAME Board of Directors, and GBHEM Lead Hub Director.
Greetings, distinguished guests, esteemed scholars, and honored participants. On behalf of APAME, Asia Pacific Association of the Methodist Educational Institution, and GBHEM, General Board of Higher Education and Ministry of the United Methodist Church, I extended heartfelt gratitude to all participants. It is an honor to share our congratulations to commemorate Aoyama Gakuen University's 150th anniversary and explore the profound theme, the legacy of John Franklin Goucher, a global vision for Christian education. I'm also congratulate this special gathering of 2025 IAMSCU Research University Symposium, hosted by Aoyama Gakuen's partnership together with ABBA and GVHM. This event holds a special significance as we remember Goucher's visionary commitment to education and Christian value, continues to inspire institutions and individuals worldwide. This symposium is an opportunity to reflect on his legacy and envision the future of Christian education in addressing global challenges. We deeply appreciate Aoyama Gakuen University's effort in organizing this meaningful event. This dedication to academic excellence and Christian principles aligns with the ideas we celebrate today. Let us engage wholeheartedly in today's discussion and the lectures, learn from one another, and strengthen our shared mission of advancing education and faith in global context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chancellor Yamamoto and Dr. Pike, for getting us off to a wonderful start. Now we have a special guest who will introduce the symposium theme and provide a brief overview of the life of John Franklin Goucher. Our three speakers will each delve into important aspects of Goucher's life, but to set the stage, we will first hear about who he was and why he is the theme of today's symposium. This introduction and overview will be given by Reverend Dr. Mike Sherrill, founding board member of APAME and former faculty member of Aoyama Gakuen University.
Well, it is a privilege to join you for this 10th annual IAMSCU Research University Symposium, where we celebrate the life and legacy of John Franklin Goucher, a man whose vision for education, faith, and global mission has left a positive mark on the world. This year's theme, the legacy of John Franklin Goucher, a global vision for Christian education, brings us together to reflect on the extraordinary contributions of an educator, missionary, and philanthropist who was ahead of his time. John Franklin Goucher was born on June 7, 1845 in Pennsylvania. After earning his degree from Dickinson College in 1868, Goucher was ordained in the Methodist Episcopal Church the following year. From the very beginning of his ministry, Goucher demonstrated a remarkable commitment to both local and global communities. As a pastor in Baltimore, Maryland, he not only built thriving congregations, but also developed a deep passion for education, particularly for women and marginalized groups. In 1877, Goucher married Mary Cecilia Fisher, who was raised in Baltimore and was the daughter of a wealthy physician. Through the larger Fisher family, the Gouchers inherited a great deal of money and dedicated their lives together to Christian mission and global education. The story of John's life is also the story of Mary's life, as they were partners in all things. In 1885, Goucher co-founded what was then the Women's College of Baltimore City, an institution dedicated to providing rigorous academic opportunities for women at a time when such access was rare. This college was renamed Goucher College in 1910 in honor of the transformative vision that he and his wife Mary brought to life. Together, they gave generously to ensure the success of the college and championed the belief that education was a powerful force for social and spiritual upliftment. But Goucher's vision did not stop at the borders of the United States. His involvement with the Methodist Episcopal Church's Board of Foreign Missions allowed him to channel his resources and energy into founding and supporting educational institutions around the world. Goucher understood the potential of education to transform societies and promote mutual understanding across cultures. He played a key role in establishing schools and colleges in India, China, Korea, and Japan, embodying the Methodist commitment to global mission and social justice. Here in Japan, Goucher's contributions are inseparable from the history of Aoyama Gakuin. In the early 1880s, Goucher provided critical financial support to secure the land for Aoyama Gakuin's current campus in Tokyo. He also envisioned the institution as a place where the best of Japanese and Western educational traditions could come together under a shared commitment to Christian values. Goucher's belief in the transformative power of education continues to shape Aoyama Gakuin's mission and identity to this day, as it does for so many other institutions he supported. What makes Goucher truly remarkable is not only the breadth of his influence, but also the depth of his vision. He believed in the value of liberal arts education, not as an end in itself, but as a means to cultivate individuals who would serve their communities with integrity, compassion, and faith. He understood education as a calling to engage with the world's challenges, to advocate for justice, and to bring hope to those in need. Today, as we gather to explore Goucher's enduring legacy, we are reminded of the profound connections between education, faith, and service. Our speakers will guide us through different dimensions of Goucher's impact, from his global missionary work to his influence on the development of educational institutions in Korea and Japan. As we celebrate Aoyama Gakuin's 150th anniversary, it is fitting that we pause to reflect on the visionary leadership of John Franklin Goucher. His life reminds us of the power of education to bridge cultures, transform lives, and inspire future generations.
Thank you so much for that wonderful overview, Dr. Cheryl. Now it is time to move on to our presentations. Dr. Shew will introduce our first speaker.
Thank you. It is truly an honor for me to introduce to you Marilyn Southard Warshinsky. I met Marilyn almost 15 years ago at another symposium that was honoring John Goucher. Marilyn is a proud alumni of Goucher College, and although the many, wonderful achievements of her life are beyond what I can explain today for this introduction, I just want to lift up a few things. For many years, she has been involved in the governance and leadership of Goucher College as a trustee, and she was chair of the trustees from 1999 until 2004. So she was chair of the board in 2002 when Aoyama Gakuin built a new chapel called Goucher Memorial Chapel. And we invited her to Aoyama Gakuin to give remarks on that occasion. So it's another great opportunity to have this connection with her. Of course, her most significant contribution to our understanding of today's theme is her book. This amazing book, John Franklin Goucher, Citizen of the World, published in 2016. This biography stands as the most authoritative account of Goucher's life and legacy, and I personally reference it every time I'm researching about Goucher. In recognition of her contributions, she was also named Goucher College's first official historian by the Board of Trustees in 2021. So without further ado, I would ask her to present to you about her insights into the life of John Goucher.
Thank you, Paul. It was also a pleasure to welcome you into Baltimore, into Goucher College a few years ago, to show you Lovely Lane Church and where Goucher lived and his grave. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight. This evening, I'm sorry, for me. My passion about writing for John Goucher really began at IAMSCU when I visited for that talk at the chapel, talking about Dr. Goucher. It was the international exchange event at the time. So I felt I was following in Dr. Goucher's footsteps, because in 1907, he had spoken at a commencement at a Goucher Hall at IAMSCU. And so I was struck by the fact that both my life and the lives of other generations of students at my school and at IAMSCU had been influenced by the opportunities that Dr. Goucher had offered us. At the time, I really had only a basic understanding of the scope of his work. But when I left Japan with a desire to learn more about his life and to share it with others, I soon began my research about him, and I was hooked. I set out on a dozen-year odyssey to explore his life and record his accomplishments. My husband, David, who is a sculptor, was also drawn into the pursuit of John Goucher. He and a colleague were commissioned by a Korean friend, Charles Pang, who attended Peiche High School, to sculpt a bronze bust of Dr. Goucher for display at the Goucher Memorial Chapel in Seoul, which was dedicated in 2015. Another bust was commissioned by a Goucher alumna and trustee for display on the Goucher College campus. And behind me, you can see the original cast for that bust, so we can all feel that Dr. Goucher's presence while we all talk. You heard some already about Dr. Goucher's history and life, but I'd like to add some more for this occasion. John Goucher combined the rare talents of being able to create and carry out projects that would change society, as well as to finance them. His faith and dedication to God were the foundation of his personal and his public life. He was called to the ministry as a youth, and while he could have become a Methodist bishop during his lifetime, he preferred being able to travel, to undertake and see projects firsthand, and to meet people worldwide. One of his beliefs was that every person should live for others, because no person can live without others. He put this thought into action in many ways and in many places. His work covered the last 2 decades of the 19th century and the first 2 decades of the 20th, but his continued influence now spans more than a century. I found that he was ahead of his time on many important issues, and some of them he addressed in his lifetime are again in the forefront of today's news. Before talking more about John Goucher, though, I would also like to mention and recognize the partner of his heart, Mary Fisher Goucher. John's first assignment as a Methodist minister was in the Baltimore Conference in 1869, where he rode on horseback to oversee 8 churches and take care of 7 Sunday schools. He met Mary Fisher, one of the Sunday school teachers, in his first week, and they shared the same devotion to the church and furthering its work and outreach to others. Mary would inherit a large fortune from her family, and when John asked her father, after 8 years of courtship, for his permission to marry, John said, "I want her for her own self, but I think I could do a great deal of good with her money." And we know that he did. John and Mary married on Christmas Eve, 1877, and they had a warm, loving home life with 3 daughters. He felt that home is given to us as a kind of heaven. Visitors of all ages and nationalities were welcomed to the house in Baltimore or at Altadale, their country home where Mary grew up. It was also important to understand that they were very much partners in determining what projects to support, where they were located, and how much to contribute. His philosophy was that life is a treasure for investment. You cannot, in any adequate sense, keep it unless you invest it. As each new year arrived, John and Mary sat down and planned together where their donations would do the most good. He believed, and Mary agreed, that the only way to get anything out of money is by using it, and the way to get the most out of money is by dedicating it to God. Mary's death in 1902 was a blow for John. It was said that they planned in faith and planted in continence. And when she died, he felt a double responsibility to continue and care for all the projects that they had already started together. What were some of those projects? In the 1880s, among the projects, they were busy building churches, helping open the first Methodist missions in Korea and West China, establishing schools, and funding a hospital for women near Beijing. During that decade, they donated more than $12 million in today's US dollars to support numerous projects in Baltimore, the American West, and abroad. Their monetary gifts were often combined with buying land to ensure a project's success. Their gifts ranged from thousands of dollars to open missions, to a few $100s to provide hymnals to a mission church in Mexico, and to providing money for a missionary in the US state of Oklahoma to buy a cow to provide milk for his family. As was mentioned, John Goucher served as a minister for more than 30 years, and he understood the importance of bringing people together for worship. He oversaw the building of several new churches in his assignments in Baltimore. One of his greatest challenges was building today's Lovely Lane United Methodist Church, a descendant of the Lovely Lane Meeting House, where at the 1784 Christmas conference, the Methodist Episcopal Church was organized in America. The title of one of his sermons, Rise Up and Build, was a rallying cry for his church building work, but also could be applied to his other projects in building missions and schools as well. As Goucher built churches in Baltimore, he was aware of the needs for churches in other parts of the country and the world. He had read about the scarcity of churches in the American West as it expanded across the country. Settlers were often poor and living in isolated areas. Towns often had more saloons than they did churches. Through the Methodist Church Extension Society, John and Mary gave an anonymous gift to create the Frontier Loan Fund. This fund gave a community a stipend of a few $100s to build a church, and then asked the congregation to give time, labor, and money to complete. Over a 40-year period, loans from the Goucher Frontier Fund helped build more than 175 churches in the American West. Some are still thriving Methodist congregations. He recognized the need for churches in other countries as well. There had been a strong Methodist presence in Fuzhou, China, since the late 1800s, but as the number of Christians grew, there was a need for more churches. So in the early 1900s, Dr. Goucher gave money to build 15 new churches in that area. Goucher wanted to be a missionary himself when he was young, but ill health prevented it. Nevertheless, as a young minister, he offered his daily prayers for different missions worldwide, and he helped direct his congregation's annual missionary contributions to needs supporting things like the education of several girls in India. In the early 1880s, he became a member of the Methodist Missionary Board in New York, which oversaw both domestic and foreign missions. He often made suggestions for new projects, which the board sometimes questioned, but it soon learned that his proposals were sound and that his and Mary's generosity brought welcome changes to promote growth for the church. Two of those offers involved China. John and Mary gave their first gift there in 1879 through the Women's Foreign Missionary Society to open a hospital for women in Tientsin. They understood and believed in nurturing the body as well as the mind and the soul. Women in China were not only denied an education, but also suffered from lack of health care. The Isabella Fisher Hospital, named for Mary's sister, brought modern medical care to this under-reserved population. The following year, a missionary in Fuzhou mission wrote to Goucher about expanding mission work to West China, a hazardous weeks-long journey up the Yangtze River. But foreign merchants were pushing trade there in that direction. There was already a British consul stationed in Sichuan province, and Catholic missionaries were establishing missions there. The challenge of creating the first Methodist mission in China appealed to Goucher, and John and Mary made pledges to send 2 missionaries to establish a mission in Chongqing. Other missions opened later in the region, which became an important point of Methodist influence in China. Another pioneering suggestion was for Korea. As Dr. Goucher began focusing on missions, he often learned about them through reading and studying issues or meeting and corresponding with missionaries in the field. But an unexpected meeting on the train led him to consider a new opening for Methodist missions. Korea and the US had signed a treaty in 1882, and the following year, Korean delegates were traveling to DC to present their credentials to President Chester Arthur. Dr. Goucher met the envoys on a train and was intrigued by their country and the possibility for Methodists to be the first to open a mission there. He immediately offered the Missionary Society several $1,000s to send a missionary and a medical doctor to Korea and to buy land for the mission. Henry Gerhard Appenzeller and Dr. William Scranton arrived in Seoul in 1885. Through the mission, Peije Hakdang for boys and Iwa Hakdang for girls opened soon after. And these schools credit Goucher as a source for their success for his opening the Korean mission. On his first trip to Korea in 1907, he met with Emperor Kojong, and in 1910, he attended the mission's 25th anniversary during another trip to Asia. But perhaps his lasting influence, especially for those attending this symposium, was in opening schools. A friend noted that John had a passion for education and believed it was a panacea for many of the world's ills. As John himself said, the 2 most important things in this world are life and education. Without education, there would be no development. Everything would remain in status quo or deteriorate. He felt that a nation's future depended upon an educated population. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he believed that everyone should have the opportunity for an education, regardless of gender, race, religion, or social class. He put that belief into action at 2 schools in his home city of Baltimore, and also in India, Japan, Korea, and China. There were limited opportunities for education, for African American education in segregated Maryland and in the South in the US. The Centenary Biblical Institute was founded after the Civil War to train African American men for the ministry, and it grew to include teacher education for men and women. John and Mary gave land and building funds to give the school a permanent home. Dr. Goucher served as board chair for 40 years, and during that time, he raised the institute to college grade, having it become Morgan College. The college moved to a new campus in the early 20th century against a segregation backlash and attempts to close the college. But this historically Black college and university is now Morgan State University, part of our Maryland state system. There were few opportunities for women for higher education in the mid-1800s also, especially in the South. It was not a popular idea for women to have higher education, feeling that they were not fit either physically or mentally to handle such college courses. Goucher, however, believed that women in their lives could have many roles at home, at work, as a volunteer, and they should be trained for all. While a minister at Lovely Lane in the mid-1880s, Dr. Goucher was involved with the Baltimore Conference to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the organization of the Methodist Church in the United States. He was part of a committee that proposed establishing a college for women, and as a challenge to raise funds, he gave land next to Lovely Lane Church to establish the college. It was successful, and the college was chartered as the Women's College of Baltimore City in 1885, and as mentioned, renamed Goucher College for John and Mary in 1910. This would have been the same year the Korean mission opened with Goucher funds. The college grew and Goucher became president in 1890, leaving the ministry but remaining actively involved with education and missions around the world. The college also welcomed international students, especially women from countries with Goucher-related school ties. He also offered scholarships to support these students. Going abroad, beginning in 1882, John and Mary offered funds to support schools in small villages in North India, where education was scarce and usually not available to girls or those of low caste. The classes were taught in the vernacular of the area, so students returning home could share what they learned and help educate their parents. The Gouchers first supported 50 schools, which were known as Goucher schools, and the number grew to more than 120 after 20 years. They were attended by both boys and girls, Muslims and Hindus, and the highest and lowest castes. The Gouchers also gave dozens of scholarships for the best students to continue their education to the next level. Their total gifts during that period was nearly $4 million US dollars today for the Goucher schools. It was estimated that there were 50,000 conversions to Christianity because of these schools, and 200 weddings annually among students who had graduated from the schools. And there's still a town in North India named Goucher. Besides these schools in India, Lucknow, India, Isabella Thoburn had raised her small school she created for girls to college grade in the late 1880s. And Goucher paid for the first faculty member. As president of the Women's College in Baltimore, he encouraged students there to donate and send materials to support the school. And the relationship between the schools continued for many decades through exchanges of faculty and students. John and Mary learned about the Japan mission through Methodist friends Robert McClay and Julius Soper. He and Mary offered support for the mission, and then in 1882, he recommended that a school in Yokohama merge with a boys' school in Tokyo to create the Anglo-Japanese College, which has now become IAMA Gaikuin University. He and Mary offered funds to buy land in Tokyo and also gave money to build the first academic building named Goucher Hall. At the same time, there was another Goucher Hall opened at the Women's College in Baltimore, so that there were two Goucher Halls on opposite sides of the world. Dr. Goucher continued to offer advice and support to the school in Japan, seeing its name changed to IAMA Gaikuin, and also helped pay for the second Goucher Hall when the first was damaged by an earthquake. In recognition of his distinguished service to Japan and its people, in 1919, the emperor conferred on him the Imperial Decoration of the Order of the Rising Sun, the highest honor bestowed on a civilian. You will hear more about Dr. Goucher's work in Japan from Paul. Dr. Goucher was well known and sought after in Methodist and Protestant circles. He was recognized as a master organizer who combined gentle persuasion with practicality, shrewdness, and a good business sense. As one acquaintance noted, he always had a program, a remedy, and always spelled progress. He attended the World Missionary Conference in Edinburgh in 1910, which shaped his work and travels in the years to come. As a result of these meetings, a continuation committee was formed to further examine issues and develop better coordination in missionary work among Protestant denominations. Dr. Goucher became the chair of a subcommittee regarding Christian education in the mission field, focusing on Asia. While he continued his involvement with Methodist committees and projects he had long supported, he began extensive interactions with other Protestant missionary and educational efforts. One of the most important joint efforts was the West China Union University, today's Sichuan University. At the Centenary Conference in China in 1907, Dr. Goucher met with delegates from West China to discuss development of a union university in that area. After he resigned from the presidency of the Women's College of Baltimore in 1908, the Board of Foreign Missions asked him to serve on a new board for the proposed school. The board was to coordinate efforts between missionaries in China and Methodists and other denominations in their home countries to plan and raise funds for a united university. Dr. Goucher was instrumental in persuading his colleagues to accept this challenge, and the West China Union University opened in 1910. He later funded schools in the area, offered scholarships as he had done in North India, and opened Goucher units for teaching at West China Union University. He served as the first board chair of governors, a position he held until his death. And one of the things that Dr. Goucher loved to do was travel. Wherever the work of the church was called him, or his curiosity and his zest for life led him. He enjoyed being outdoors, seeing native flora and fauna, as well as viewing historic sites and attending formal receptions. He liked to see projects firsthand and didn't mind traveling to the center of the action, even over difficult and dangerous terrain. He was often away from Baltimore for weeks or even months at a time. And he also liked to travel for itself, and he was never afraid to go to dangerous places for education or mission needs. It was estimated that he traveled 1.5 million miles by land and sea during his lifetime. He made 3 trips around the world, crossed the Atlantic 25 times, and visited Asia 7 times. He traveled by train, including the Trans-Siberian Railroad, by steamships, and by cars. He even flew once on an airplane from London to Paris. Riding an elephant in India was common for him. He visited the Philippines and Panama, California and the American West, and towns in Malaysia, as well as trekking into the jungle to meet with an Aboriginal tribe. On one vacation in 1909, he and a friend left New York to cross the Atlantic, but a few hours after leaving port, their ship was struck by another and began to sink. Dr. Goucher volunteered to help row passengers to safety on another ship, spending 2 hours on the cold, dark water. On their return to New York, Dr. Goucher arranged for tickets to continue their voyage. Later in the vacation, he and his friend crossed the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt to reach Jerusalem in time for Easter. They rode 350 miles on camels and another 650 miles on horseback, living in tents along the way. And despite reports of marauding bandits along the route to West China, in 1914, he traveled several weeks by houseboat on the Yangtze River, then overland, carried in a sedan chair to reach Chengdu. He became well known to those working directly on education and mission work, and they felt he understood their problems and concerns. His name was familiar in many countries. In India, he was known as Goucher Sahib Jai. In China, Go Yok Hong. In Japan, Gaosha. And in Korea, Gowuchyo. It is easy to see why he was called the citizen of the world. He had planned another trip to Asia after his third round the world trip in 1920 to 21, but his health declined and he soon was restricted to his home. He continued correspondence with missionaries and church and school organizations. With 2 of his daughters around him, he died peacefully at Altadale in July 1922. It was noted that he had planned for this journey as calmly as for any other of his many voyages into a far country. I'd like to just give some descriptions of him by other people who knew him very well that summarize kind of ideas about him. A pioneer in education, a polished gentleman and a priceless friend, a practical idealist, a man of unlimited horizons, youthful in outlook and life, but ripe in experience, a scholar and a most productive mind, a man in love with service, the clear vision chief of staff in field operations, and the master diplomat, a man who accomplished great things for society, for the world, and for the church. In this time of xenophobia and such world tension, we should follow Dr. Goucher's example. The friend mentioned that to him there was no foreign land, to him no foreign man. He passed from one country to another without sense of strangeness. As we've already mentioned here, those of us who are here really are tied together through the many things that he had done for us through our educations. A friend of Dr. Goucher said at his death, the consolation, of course, is the work he left behind, which will not die. And another said that he needs no monument. His monument is everywhere. Though both of these statements are evident that this symposium, where we are speakers and attendees, that all of us represent important, thriving institutions that he helped and found. I hope I've conveyed why I've become so excited and enthralled about learning Dr. Goucher and his work and his lasting impact. And I hope that those participating and listening in the symposium will want to learn more about him as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Warshawski. Your work and perspective on John Goucher are truly inspiring. Let us all give Mrs. Warshawski a hand and a thumbs up, Zoom hand. Thank you so much. Now it is time for a second presentation. Dr. Dr.Shew will introduce our second speaker.
Our next speaker, is Dr. John So, an associate professor of Korean Christian history at the Methodist Theological University in Seoul, South Korea. Dr. So is a graduate of Methodist Theological University and earned his PhD at Yonsei University. His research focuses on Korea's rich Christian heritage, with particular attention to the historical interactions between indigenous religions and Christianity, as well as the relationship between traditional Christian architecture and Christian spaces. As part of his scholarship, he's also published a research paper in the renowned journal Religion and the Arts by Brill Publishers. Today, Dr. So will share his insights on John Goucher's legacy in Korea, highlighting Goucher's influence on Christian education and the church in Korea. It's such a pleasure for us to be able to welcome Dr. John So today. Thank you very much and welcome to the symposium. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, it is a great honor to participate in the 150th anniversary celebration of Aoyama Gakuin University and to deliver this presentation. Before I begin, I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Paul Shew for giving me this opportunity. I also enjoyed the insightful presentation by Professor Marilyn. In my own research on John Franklin Goucher, I have frequently referred to her work. To ensure we stay within the allotted presentation time, I will read from the following script. I will share the screen. Please wait a moment. Okay. As you mentioned earlier, John F. Goucher's life had a significant impact not only on ministry within the United States, but also on educational mission across the world, particularly in Northwest Asia. My aim today is to examine how Goucher's influence shaped education in Korea within each historical context. This topic is especially meaningful as 2025 marks the 140th anniversary of Protestant mission in Korea. Goucher's educational philosophy, which defined education as a righteous life, training individuals to serve others, and education accessible to all equally, embodies Christian values that hold universal relevance in human education. Thus, his mission and educational endeavors remain compelling across time and place. This building is east of the Beje School, and Goucher was present at the dedication of the building. Goucher continued to donate to the development of the school. The building is currently located in Cheongdong, Seoul, and is used as the museum for the history of Peche Academy. On the other hand, when Goucher and R.S. McCrae were preparing for a mission in Korea, the nation was facing significant turmoil and had only recently begun opening its doors to the world. Before Protestant mission began, the Korea government had persecuted thousands of Catholic believers on multiple occasions. Korea subsequently established diplomatic relations with Japan in 1876 and with the United States in 1882, marking its foray into modern diplomacy, which was unfamiliar and challenging for the nation. Traditionally, Korea had conducted diplomacy under the suzerainty of China, consulting with Beijing on all foreign matters. However, its new independent dealing with Japan and the U.S. sign signaled the beginning of the modern diplomatic era. Necessarily, modern education. This figure is the prosecutor of Catholics beating his son in front of his parents to force them to apostatize. So after establishing a relation with the U.S., Korea sent its first official delegation, known as the Special Embassy, what we call Bobingsa, to the United States in 1883. This delegation not only visited the U.S., but also played a critical role in shaping the direction of Korea's diplomacy. On their journey from Korea to Washington via Chicago, the delegation's leader, Min Young-ik, a royal relative of Queen Min, encountered John F. Carter on a train. This encounter led Carter to contribute $2,000 to support Korean missions, laying the groundwork for a Protestant mission activities in Korea. He later contributed an additional $3,000 to secure land for the missions. This is the picture of the Bobingsa with Min Young-ik in the center in red. On his left is Hong Young-sik, and on his right is Seo Kwang-bom. Later, I will tell them. It is important to note that the mission effort by Culture and Maclay were not merely act of charity. Their foundation belief was the education and medical mission formed the bedrock of Christian missions. Subsequently, Maclay traveled to Korea, met with U.S. diplomat Lucius Foote, and successfully secured mission property, paving the way for the establishment of the Methodist Episcopal mission in June 1884. Later that year, Grace and Ireland, a medical missionary from the Presbyterian Church, also arrived in Korea. Interesting, Ireland began his missionary work on land secured by Gaucho and Maclay. Ireland came to Korea with an appointment as a U.S. legatee rather than an official missionary, reflecting their ecumenical ethos of prioritizing cooperation over denominational rivalry, a lesson that still holds true today. Picture here is Dr. Allen and Ganghae-won Hospital. Before Ganghae-won, Allen's missionary beginning and foundation began with Gaucher and Maclay. Returning to the Bobingsa, the delegation members had differing views on modernization. Min Young-ik, being a royal relative, favored a gradual modernization modeled on China, while others like Hong Young-sik and Seo Kwang-bom prepared a rapid modernization inspired by Japan. Their experiences in the U.S. further solidified these divisions, with a progressive group advocating faster modernization and a conservative faction fearing its impact on the monarchy. Despite these differences, both groups recognized that the need for a modern education to navigate Korea's rapid diplomatic and cultural changes. This divergence in views eventually culminated in a political upheaval, leading the Kapsin coup in 1884, initiated by the progressive faction with Japanese support. Although the coup lasted only 3 days and ended in a failure, it highlighted the tension between progressive and conservatives first during the coup. Min Young-ik was very uh, severely injured, but was successfully treated by the Dr. Allen, the medical missionary. This incident earned Allen the trust of the royal family, allowing him to establish Gwanghae-won, Korea's first modern hospital with government support. This event demonstrated how Protestant mission were not only part of the Korea's modernization, but also become trusted ally of the conservative faction. In April 1885, two pioneering missionaries, Methodist Harry G. Appengelo and Presbyterian Horace G. Underwood, arrived in Korea. Appengelo, an educational missionary, had previously been selected for this role by Gaucho and shared his educational philosophy. Appengelo's work led to the establishment of Beije Hakdang, later Beije High School, Beije University. Now the Gaucho's visit to Korea and the expansion of Christian education. Gaucho visited Northeast Asia, including Korea, 6 times despite the challenges of the travel at the time, offering a crucial guidance and support for educational missions. His contributions were instrumental in the growth of modern educational institutions like Ihwa Hakdang, now Ihwa Women's University, Korea's first educational institution for women, founded by Mary Clinton. Gaucho's financial and ideological support helped expand the school's mission of educating better Koreans and empowering women. This is a building of the early Ihwa Hakdang. While the land was initially purchased with support from the Women's Foreign Missionary Society of the Methodist Episcopal Church, but Gaucho continued to make a significant contribution to the school. This reflects the importance Gaucho placed on women's education, which was also mirrored in his support for educational efforts in Korea. Also, he approached the selection of land and securing funds for Joseon Christian College, the predecessor of the Yonsei University, in a very detailed and systematic manner. In particular, he requested specific financial support from John Thomas Underwood, the brother of the Korean missionary H.J. Underwood, from the Underwood family, famous for Underwood typewriters. Gaucho's passion for mobilizing and organizing sponsors to this and laid the foundation for Joseon Christian College to develop into today's Yonsei University. Moreover, when establishing the school and organizing its structure, he appointed author Lin Becker, a missionary from the Northern Methodist Episcopal Church, as the vice president to oversee to school's practical affairs. The significance of this school lies not only in cultivating leaders within Christianity, but also in fostering leaders who sacrifice and serve Korean society through talent development via higher education. Therefore, it's important to remember that, along with Underwood, John Gaucho played a large role in the establishment of Joseon Christian College, the beginning of the Yonsei University. This image shows the site of the what is now Yonsei University in Seoul, as it appeared during the time of its selection. John F. Gaucho played a key role in the process of securing this location for the university, which was known as Joseon Christian College. So this is an old report of Joseon Christian College. The building is currently used as the main building where the president office of Yonsei University in Seoul is located. When this school was founded, Underwood's brother, John Thomas Underwood, the creator of the famous Underwood typewriter, generously supported the school financially, and it was Goucher who made this possible. This map shows the original campus of the Joseon Christian College, which remains the heart of the Yonsei University today. 폐제, 학당. As I briefly touched upon earlier, I'd like to mention 폐제 again. 폐제 학당 was an educational institution in late Joseon and the Korean Empire period, founded on August 3, 1885 by American Methodist missionary Henry G. Appengero in Seoul. It was a modern secondary educational institution and predecessor of Peje Middle School, Peje High School, and Peje University also. The curriculum included English, arithmetic, geography, chemistry, medicine, and other subjects with a study period of 3 years. Goucher not only knew Appengero before he became a missionary in Korea, but also shared educational ideas with him. Sadly, Appengero died in a maritime accident in 1902 while on his way to translate the Bible. Later, in 1907, Goucher visited Korea for the first time. During this visit, he visited Peche Hakdang and made a donation to the school whenever it expanded or grew. The following photo shows the Peche Hakdang building located in Jeongdong, Seoul. Goucher, who had been a generous benefactor to the school, attended the completion ceremony of this building to celebrate its opening. So, yes, this photo showcases alumni of Peje Hakdang, a historical educational institution in Korea. On the left is Seungman Lee, the first president of South Korea, and next to him, the Ju Shikyung, a prominent scholar of the Korean languages. Yes, regrettable fact I encountered while preparing for this presentation is that despite Goucher's concrete education and contribution to modern education in Korea, contemporary educational institutions rarely mention or are even aware of his involvement. I believe this presentation serves as a starting point for researching Goucher and his influence on modern education in Korea. Furthermore, I found it meaningful to examine his educational philosophy today, as it presents a guide for the right direction humanity should take. In today's capitalist society, the gap between the rich and poor people widening more than ever in Korea. In this time, the reason for studying and learning is not for personal success, but to live to a life of helping and sacrificing for other neighbors and society. Therefore, rather than simply listing his accomplishment and the schools he helped establish, I want to emphasizing the significance of exploring his ideology through participating in this seminar on John Goucher. I firmly believe that his philosophy can still guide our society toward becoming one with the right values. And I hope Aoyama Gakuin University continue to foster a more beautiful and meaningful society inspired by culture's values. Thank you. ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much, Dr. So. Your perspective on John Goucher and his influence on the church in Korea was fascinating, and I also want to echo the sentiment that I hope this can be a start for further research, as you spoke on earlier. Let us all give Dr. So a Zoom hand and thumbs up. Now it is time for a third presentation. Dr. Mike Sherrill will introduce our third speaker.
Our third speaker is Dr. Paul Tsuchido-Shew, a professor at Aoyama Gakuin in Tokyo, Japan, where he specializes in Christian theology, history, and education. Dr. Shew has been a faculty member at Aoyama Gakuin for over 20 years and has also served in senior leadership roles. Dr. Shew holds advanced degrees from Harvard University and Fuller Theological Seminary, and his research focuses on the intersection of Christianity and education in global contexts, particularly within the Methodist tradition. He has given numerous lectures and published on topics such as AI and Christian education, the history of Christian schools, and the role of religion in shaping societal values. John Franklin Goucher has been one of Dr. Shew's favorite research topics since joining Aoyama Gakuin. Today, he will present on John Goucher's role in the founding and development of Aoyama Gakuin. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Paul Tsuchido-Shew.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Indeed, this has definitely been one of my favorite research subjects over the years. And for me, it was two events that made this so interesting to me. First, because I was interested in the history of Aoyama Gakuin. And then I was offered an opportunity to participate in a symposium, an international symposium at Peche University that Marilyn Barshitsky also was a participant in about 15 years ago, I think. And it was that really got me interested in looking at his history. And in the short time that we have together today, I want to first talk about Goucher and the foundation of Aoyama Gakuin, but also look at the historical view of Goucher at Aoyama Gakuin and how that has changed over time. I am particularly interested not just in historical facts, but also our perception of history and how that has changed over time. So, I will start talking about Goucher and Aoyama Gakuin with this image. We have in front of our one of our oldest buildings on campus, the administrative building, officially Barry Hall, we have these reliefs of the founding missionaries and John Goucher. Over 20 years ago, when I joined the faculty at Aoyama Gakuin, I was told that the three missionaries were the founder of Aoyama Gakuin, and indeed, at the time, that is how the history of the school was portrayed on the school website, in official documents, and in 2004, at the 130th anniversary founding of the school and those celebrations. However, in front of the old administrative building, there are not 3 reliefs on display, but there are 4. And the fourth one is indeed John Franklin Goucher. So I became interested in why there is a 4th relief here among the founders, but he wasn't mentioned in the official narrative that was presented at those events. IAMSCU currently is a comprehensive educational institution. It includes kindergarten, elementary, high school, used to also have women's junior college, all the way up through university, graduate, and professional programs. And indeed, there were many people who were involved in the founding of this institution. The easy way to tell the founding of the school is to look at the three schools that merged to form what later became IAMSCU. And that, of course, starts with the small girls' school first established by Dora Schoonmaker in 1874. She was sent by the Women's Foreign Mission Association. She arrived in Tokyo, Japan, and already other missionaries were there. She immediately got in contact with Japanese who could help her. And within 2 weeks, she had started classes for a very small group of students. And that is today recognized as the founding of IAMSCU. Her classes started November 16, 1874. So this past November, we celebrated our 150th anniversary based on the founding of that small girls' school. Julius Soper had actually been in Japan from about a year earlier, and he established a boys' school in 1878. Robert Maclay, who is the mission superintendent and the first Methodist missionary here, established the Methodist Theological School in 1879. And the simplistic way to tell the story of the founding of the school is to talk about the three missionaries who were central to each of these three schools in their founding. Now let's look for a second at Robert Maclay. Robert Maclay was a long-time missionary to China before he came to Japan. He served in China from 1847 to 1871. He established schools and churches, and he was very active in work in translating the Bible. They established a small publishing house. And then in 1871, he and his wife returned to the United States to recover their health. But it was during his time back in the United States that he traveled around to many places promoting the importance of sending missionaries to Japan, and himself offered to go. He thought that missionaries needed to be sent to Japan, and the time was now upon them. In 1873, his request was granted by the mission board of the Methodist Episcopal Church, and he is sent to Japan. This was at a time when Christian missions were again being allowed in Japan. Previously, for over 200 years, Christianity had been prohibited from Japan. However, with the Meiji Restoration and the changing political climate, missionaries could finally return. And so this was an opportune time for the Methodist Episcopal Church to begin sending missionaries to Japan. They even had missionary funds set aside for it, and they had an experienced missionary in Robert Maclay to lead those first missionaries. So the first missionaries arrived with Maclay in 1873. Julius Soper was one of them, and Maclay becomes the mission superintendent. Maclay was involved in many different activities, establishing churches, learning Japanese, creating a dictionary, beginning to translate the Bible and other things. However, he was also interested in education work. So in 1879, he established the Methodist School of Theology in Japan, and he did so with a 10,000 gift from John Goucher. That is a huge sum of money in that time. Now, Julius Soper was about one generation younger than Maclay. And I found it very interesting that Maclay, Soper, and Goucher were all a part of the Baltimore Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church. Furthermore, although Julius Soper and John Goucher went to different colleges, they were a part of the same ordination class, and they were both ordained ministers at the same annual conference in 1873. Now, John Goucher went to work at the local churches, but Julius Soper left immediately after that as a missionary to Japan. Julius Soper and John Goucher would have known each other through the ordination preparation process. So, although they were not classmates at college, they were classmates in the ordination process of the Methodist Episcopal Church. Julius Soper went to Japan and he established a boys' school in 1878 called Kokyo Gakusha. So that was the first boys' school that the Methodists established in Japan. Later, the name of his school changes to Tokyo Anglo-Japanese College. It merges with the Methodist School of Theology, and they move to a new campus at Aoyama. And that event, the changing of the names, merging and moving to a new campus, really is the establishment of a new school. And when we look at what caused that establishment, the vision, the support, the funding behind it, we see that John Goucher played a critical role. John Goucher had a vision to establish a Christian university in Tokyo. In 1881, Robert Maclay and his wife returned to the United States, again for a period of visiting churches in the United States. And during that time, Robert Maclay visits the Gouchers in Baltimore. And we don't have the details of their specific meeting, but we do know that out of that meeting came plans to establish a new school in Tokyo. And we can see it fully developed in a January 1882 proposal to the Methodist Episcopal Church Mission Board, specifically for the formation of an Anglo-Japanese university. So the plan that Goucher and Maclay together worked up was to merge the two small boys' schools in Tokyo and to move them to a more desirable location. Goucher himself invested in this project and offered a gift of $5,000 to purchase the new campus. We know from later records that Goucher was also very specific about where he wanted the campus established. The missionaries at the time were very familiar with the regulations and the limitations of where mission schools could be established. They could only be established in the territories near the harbors that were set aside for mission activities, where foreigners were allowed to live. But Goucher insisted that the school be established in Tokyo, and Goucher himself wrote to the American ambassador in Japan to establish his cooperation in getting permission to establish a Christian school outside of those foreign concession areas. So Goucher was very influential in steering where the missionaries were looking for land to buy. As it turned out, they were able to purchase what is today the central main campus of Aoyama Gakuin, which hosts both our kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school, college, and graduate programs. It's our central campus. Um, at the time, it was considered a relatively rural area on somewhat the outskirts of central Tokyo. But of course, in time, Tokyo grew up around it, and now it is considered right in the heart of Tokyo. His gift of $5,000 was only a beginning because the early school that was established needed buildings. It didn't have enough money to pay faculty. They had big plans, but they were lacking in resources. And so Goucher continued to donate within the next year for faculty salaries and for student scholarships, and then later for buildings. So his involvement in establishing the vision and contacting people in Tokyo to help arrange the establishment of the kind of school that he envisioned was key leadership for the establishment of Aoyama Gakuin. So in 1882, the new campus was purchased, and in January of 1883, the school moves to the Aoyama campus. It's important to note the early name that was used, and the name differed in English and Japanese. If you look at the English sources, the name of the school, now although the 1882 proposal said an Anglo-Japanese university, and I'm sure that that's what he was initially thinking. However, the name that actually came into use in English was Tokyo Anglo-Japanese College, reflecting the desire to continue the best of English language education available, as well as honoring and respecting the best of Japanese culture and tradition in the school as well. So it should be intrinsically an international school that blended both. And it's a college, higher education. Of course, secondary education was part of it, but it was anticipated that it would be a college, and that was the name that they used in English. However, it was not accredited by the Japanese government, and they could not use the word daigaku, or college, in Japanese. Instead, in Japanese, it was called Tokyo Eiwa Gakko, which is, if you translate it directly, Tokyo Anglo-Japanese School. So they used a more general name in Japanese because they could not get accreditation. It was not recognized as a university in Japan, but the English name makes it clear what they intended the school to be. Now, I want to take a moment here to also mention women's education. As our first speaker, Marilyn, pointed out, I think, very well, Goucher was extremely interested in women's education. He believed in education for all people, regardless of social status or gender or race. And while women's education was important in Japan as well, the women's schools in Japan, the Methodist women's schools that are part of the Methodist Church, were administered by the Women's Board of Foreign Missions, which is a separate organization. And so Goucher's leadership and gifts had to be diplomatically managed, not to seen as intruding on the independent leadership of the Women's Board, which is a very important part of the women's schools at the time. They were separate from the main mission board. They had their own independent funding, independent leadership, and I think that Goucher respected that in the way that he made his donations. However, the women's school did begin to cooperate very closely with the the Tokyo Anglo-Japanese College. The new Aoyama campus was quite large. There was plenty of space for the women's school there as well. The women's school started to move there in 1888. They moved bit by bit. And later, we can see that John Goucher had a very important influence in supporting and encouraging the women's schools, even though he took no direct part in as a beneficiary or in trying to benefit the schools as he did to the boys' schools. I think one of the poignant episodes of his visit to Japan was in 1907. In 1907, he came to Japan to visit the schools, and he was called on by all of the various representatives of the schools, as well as the Methodist Church in Japan. And among his important contacts and time that he spent was actually with the principal of Aoyama Jogakuin. Jogakuin means girls' school. So at that time, they shared the same campus, but they're still financially and organizationally separate. But the girls' school also looked to John Goucher for leadership. And I find it so interesting that the principal of Aoyama Jogakuin at the time was Amy Lewis, who herself was a graduate of Goucher College in Baltimore. So apparently the Gouchers knew her from when she was a student. Of course, actually, it wasn't called Goucher College at the time. That happens a little later. But there was that personal connection between the schools that Goucher had formed already at that time. Now, I want to share some of the photos of the buildings and other things that he donated on campus. First is Goucher Hall. This was built in 1887. Unfortunately, it was destroyed in the 1894 earthquake, and so it had to be rebuilt. John Goucher was not just instrumental as one of the founders of Aoyama Gakuin. He continued to repeatedly support and guide and also to gift money to the school over several decades for the rest of his life. He made a trip to Japan in 1898 to personally inspect the school, and then he made another large donation so that another large hall could be built in 1906. And this one was called the New Goucher Hall. The following year, in 1907, Goucher made a very important trip to Japan. His trip involved a good deal of work in China, in Korea as well. And during that trip, you can see that he was also going back and forth between those countries. He wasn't just stable in one country. He went from Japan and then back to China and Korea and then back to Japan again because he was involved in so many different projects during that time. But he was able to personally attend the founding conference of the Japan Methodist Church. He went to China after that. Then he came back later in the fall for the 25th anniversary of the founding of Aoyama Gakuin. And I find that trip back and those events very interesting for the history of Aoyama Gakuin. First, let me show you the buildings. This is New Goucher Hall. Built in 1906. This is a photo taken in 1907 when Goucher was there. Here we see another view of New Goucher Hall from the street. It was a very large, beautiful structure. And this is a postcard created in celebration of the 25th anniversary founding of Aoyama Gakuin. I want you to notice something here. The start of the school for the 25th anniversary is not the same start that we use today for the 150th anniversary. The start of the school at that time was 1882, when the vision of John Goucher started with the merging of the schools. It was the new start initiated by John Goucher and the plans to establish a new campus. Now, this is done in both English and Japanese. So whether you're reading the Japanese or the English, it's pretty much the same. But please notice here, in English it says, founder. John Goucher was recognized at that time as the founder of Aoyama Gakuin. Robert McClay was the first president, and Honda Yoitsu, or I should say if we say personal name first, it's Yoitsu Honda. He was the president in 1907. He's the first Japanese president of the school. This is another postcard from the 25th anniversary in 1907. So at that time, John Goucher was clearly regarded as the founder of Aoyama Gakuin. And I'll show you another historical document that I found early on in my research that fascinated me. I found the 1916 school pamphlet. It's one of the earliest school pamphlets that is still in our archives. And if you open up the front cover, inside on the first page, it's this. This is the whole first page. It's a large, stately photograph of John Goucher, who is clearly labeled as the founder of the institution. So during these early years of Aoyama Gakuin, John Goucher was regarded as the founder of the school. And he came back to Japan in 1910 and in 1919. His later decade of work in Japan focused especially on the work to try to establish a united Christian university. He was working to establish one both in Japan and in Korea. This came out of the work of the Edinburgh Missionary Conference. Goucher had a very important role on the continuing committee for education, and his works were actually more successful in what is today South Korea. Of course, at the time, it is called Chosen, and it is occupied by Japan as a part of the Japanese Empire. So John Goucher was actually working with the Japanese government to try to obtain permission to establish a Christian school in Seoul. And that work is successful. So I want to thank Dr. John So for mentioning the work of the establishment of the Christian University and how that developed into Yonsei University, because in the last 10 years of Goucher's work in Japan, much of it was dedicated to the establishment of that Union Christian University. And he was working to establish a Union Christian University in both Korea and in Tokyo. Unfortunately, he was not able to get the churches and schools in Tokyo to come up with a plan that was successful. In Korea, it ended up to be, I think, successful, and that did form the establishment of the school. But in Japan, there were too many competing ideas, and it didn't actually result in the formation of a school. Due to the great Tokyo-Yokohama earthquake of 1923, Aoyama campus was completely destroyed. And then again in World War II, Aoyama campus was destroyed. We were, of course, bombed during the American bombing of Tokyo. However, in 2001, we rebuilt our chapel and we named it the Goucher Memorial Chapel, and the whole building is called Goucher Memorial Hall. The first 3 stories of it is a very large chapel that can fit about 700 people. That's what we use today for our university worship, as well as for concerts and lecture halls all the time. The building itself is about 12 stories tall. So we continue to honor the memory of John Goucher at Aoyama Gakuin through buildings today. Now, my final slide today. Historicity of Aoyama Gakuin and Goucher's contributions. I think that examining the narrative of how history is told is very interesting. We should always be careful to avoid the simple myths that tend to develop. Looking at the establishment of a large, comprehensive educational institution like Aoyama Gakuin and calling only 3 people the founders is far too simplistic. There are many founders, and John Goucher is one of many very important founders. When we look specifically at Goucher's contributions, we can see that he gave at the time well over $60,000 in direct financial gifts to the school. He gave more indirect gifts. And if you convert that into current money today, it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The buildings and the land and salaries and student scholarships, it's just an unimaginable amount of money that he and his wife Mary together contributed for the founding of this institution. Perhaps even more important than the money was the vision for Christian higher education in Japan. And he did that directly working with missionaries, but he also did it through the mission board of the Methodist Episcopal Church. John Goucher was very much a team player, and he always worked cooperatively. I am personally so impressed with how many people he was in contact with to get their cooperation. He was never trying to do these large projects by himself. He was working closely with missionaries on the ground, but he was also working with the mission board of the Methodist Episcopal Church. He was contacting politicians like the American ambassador to Japan, and he was also writing directly to the Japanese government. When he made his visits to Japan, he made time to meet with important politicians in Tokyo and even the Prime Minister of Japan. So his educational work became well recognized in Japan at the time, not just among Christian circles, but among secular circles as well. He was recognized as a leader for education in general that was trying to bring people together and improve the world through education. His recognition of contributing to education in Japan is clear when he was awarded the third degree of the Order of the Rising Sun in 1919 during his trip to Japan. And this is, as Marilyn has already mentioned today, that is the highest honor available to a private citizen in Japan. So that was an incredibly important recognition of the service that he has done, not just to one school, but to education in Japan as a whole. And so that that wraps up my presentation, and I thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shew. Your presentation on John Goucher and the founding of Aoyama Gakuin was so engaging. Let us all give Dr. Shew a Zoom hand and thumbs up. Now I think we'll move into the open discussion and Q&A session. This is an opportunity for our participants to ask questions and engage in dialogue with our three speakers. The session will be moderated by Professor Neerja Masi of Isabella Thorburn College from Lucknow, India. I'd like to hand it over to her now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I take this as an opportunity and my proud privilege that before I go on to the open session, I would like to say thank you very much to all the three speakers for enlightening us and giving us an insight of John Goucher. And as today we have gathered here to commemorate and celebrate life of John Franklin Goucher, it was so wonderful to hear from the speakers about the life of, like uh, Merlin spoke about the life of Goucher, and Paul Shew spoke about how he contributed, and he is the major contributor in the coming up and the present existence of the Aoyama Gakuin University. And John so nicely presented what is his contribution in Korea, and very brilliantly. And it was really very touching for me to hear about my college like that. Merlin also spoke about Isabella Thoburn College, and it is giving me, an encouragement to go back and see my archival galleries and search for something so that I can actually communicate to you something very substantial. But when I was going through I was doing my research in how Goucher has contributed in India in the education. So I found very interesting collection of letters, which states about the uh, how the correspondence or the letter, was correspondences in which there are some collection of letters which say that how there is Lucknow Christian College, currently known as, which was known as Reed Christian College, and how they were challenged in raising funds, and after the mutiny they were actually in a very there was a famine also, they was in a bad shape, and how Goucher provided significant financial support to many of his colleagues in an effort to establish schools in India and other countries. So this is very nice, and also I feel very proud that I have visited Yonsei University, Aoyama Gakuin University, Eva University, and also I have visited Lucknow Christian College. So it makes me very, very happy. And I want to say one more thing, that today we think that in this modern era, we have become a global village. We have become like we can get in touch with each other with just drop of a button. I mean, touch of a button. But I was feeling so much of gratitude for these American missionaries who came, who traveled, transcending the boundaries of the continents, and they came, because I am also beneficiary. I studied in this college, and where I am right now, faculty. So thank you very much for sharing all these things. Now coming to questions, right now I can see one question, and it is very, very relevant, by Dr. Thompson. He says that his question is to Dr. John So. As in his presentation mentioned In today's capitalist society, the gap between the rich and the poor is widening more than ever in Korea, which is happening in most of the countries in the world. How do you think the John Franklin Goucher modern education ideology will help to optimize the problem of gap between rich and poor classes, since education is also the resource held by a rich class? So over to you.
Yes, thank you for the Dr. Thompson's questions. Um, it reflects Goucher's ideology of providing learning opportunities to people from various social crises. I understand that Goucher offered high quality education to everyone, regardless of race or gender at the time. This philosophy is distinct from the idea of education being monopolized by a privileged class. Therefore, I believe that even today, Christian education and Christian schools should continue to provide opportunity for learning. Even in Korea, wealthy neighborhoods in Seoul have significantly more learning opportunity. I believe that Christian schools and Christian should at least make effort to address this issue. Just Jesus Christ sacrificed his own body. I believe it is time to reflect on the spirit of Christianity through Goucher's example. Thank you very much.
So, thank you for your comment on this. And I would like if Marilyn, if you could add to this, because the ideology, you are also written so much about him. So how do you think that this gap, because the it says that education access to all and right to education, righteous education, and also that um, it is for all. So if you can reflect on this.
Well, I think he would have wanted help provide, make sure that whether it's the public or private or religious, to be able to provide the education so that all people have an opportunity um, through scholarships or public funding. I think reaching out to government officials and others to be able to businesses to be able to step in. That it's really not just for one person or one group, but it should be a collective thing to be able to address this and make it more equal.
Thank you. Thank you. Paul, you may add, you may like to contribute.
Actually, I have a question for Marilyn, if I could. Um, I think, Marilyn, that something that you touched on in your talk was that Goucher was ahead of his time in many ways.
Yes.
And I could not agree more. And I find that actually very interesting. Um, in, of course, in some ways, he was uh, a person of his time, but in some ways, he was ahead. If Goucher was alive today, where do you think he would focus for leading education today? What do you think that Goucher's vision and ideals and principles, what do you think that they say to us today in the current perspective on education in the world today?
Hmm. Very interesting. I think he was very global. I mean, I think today we have so many more opportunities to reach out to other people. I know my own college, Goucher College, is working for focusing on educating global change makers. And I think that he would probably reach out and try to bring in other, make sure that people have knowledge of and experience with and interactions with others who are not part of their own circles. I think that the fact that we have, I also have been to Yonsei, to Iwa, to Beijing, to Iowa Gaikuin. Have not been to India, unfortunately, but I think that the structures that we have in our schools and the connections that we have, that we can continue to bring them together and also expand and bring in others to offer education in both our own countries and other ways. We're bringing in more international students. I think many of our students, all of our students at Goucher have to study abroad for a period of time. So I think to be able to, John Goucher would want that, just like he went around the world 3 times. I think he would really encourage education to offer opportunities for students to be able to go to many places and learn about each other and to break down some of the barriers that are keeping us separate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's
Thank
good
you.
to hear. I also feel like IAMA Gakuin also shares many of the values that were important to John Goucher as well. So it's good to see that, Goucher College is also holding that light high.
And I would just say that he actually understood that who is my neighbor. So that is why he never restricted himself to only the uh, local things. He went global that time also. He did not see it as a challenge, and that he helped financially to all institutions is really very commendable, because in those days I can understand how much time it will be taking to any correspondence to be through, like from one, here we are just writing an email or we are just like a button away, but still I think his zeal and his passion, it is very very inspirational, very very inspirational. And we must, take this mission forward. So I have another question. Dr. So, are Goucher's contributions to the church and to the Christian schools recognized and known in Korea today, or is he relatively unknown?
Thank you for a question for Paul. Culture is the only mentioned initially, and culture is not widely referenced in many places within the Korean church history. This is because only the main figures are often highlighted, such as the Noru or Apengero and Homo Herbert. So that's why the culture is so very rarely referred to each sections. So that's why I have to refine his work and his some meaningful plan at the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the question is from Dr. Youngmin Peck, and all 3 of you can. Do you know of any more interesting or meaningful episodes that highlight Goucher's character as a person?
I have
Merlin,
one
you? Yes.
that I can speak to. Um, I read through the archives of his correspondence that was preserved in I think it's in the archives of Columbia University, and I was surprised when I read through there to discover that not only did he support institutions, but he also took great personal interest in many of the people involved. Um, he personally supported faculty, and he personally supported, for example, the first chancellor of Aimegakuin, Honda Yoitsu. And when he passed away, when Honda Yoitsu passed away, Goucher also gave money to help support his widow. And so, Goucher was not just about establishing institutions. He cared deeply about the individuals involved in the institutions and their families. And that really impressed me because we don't see that kind of thing too much today. But that was really quite encouraging for me to read about.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, he kept in touch with missionaries, and it may be surprising, but there were missions in the United States too as they moved west, as I mentioned. But he kept in touch with them. They would write to him with their problems, concerns. So so many people felt that he was somebody that they could talk to write to, and I think that was very important. One of the ones I said that touched me was the missionary whose wife and children were very, very ill. They made very little money, were paid very little as a missionary, and he said that, I wish I don't even have enough money to buy a cow because to help my sick family. And he sort of appealed to Goucher, and so Goucher didn't mind. He reached out and helped people in even the smallest way, and he welcomed people to his home. He was one of the first converts in China, became a minister, and his daughter came to the U.S. and was one of the first medical doctors that returned to China. But she visited the Gouchers at Altodale, and she talked very fondly about being what a real American farm was, and his kindness in helping her both there, and then they met again when she was a doctor in China. So there were long relationships. As Paul said, they kept in touch. There were students I know who came from IAMSCU who came to Johns Hopkins, and Goucher helped pay for their tuition as it was a loan, but then he forgave it when it was time for repayment. So he also he let people have their pride and help them so that it was sort of a mutual way of helping each other. That he made them feel he benefited as much as they benefited from his generosity.
Thank you. So I can see Mike. Are you there? No? I mean,
Yes.
so
Hello.
Mike,
I'm here.
so good to see you after a long time.
It's
So
good to
the
see you.
same question, any anecdote or something that you remember from the life of this thing that you may like to say, because you have spent a lot of time there.
Yes, yes. The life of John Goucher certainly is inspiring, and the legacy lives on. I've visited Isabella Thorburn College, and it's a precious place in my heart, and Ihwa and Yonsei, and of course, I also worked at Aoyama Gakuin and have met many inspiring individuals who continue the legacy of John Goucher and the others who pioneered Christian education and mission work all across the world. And this is energizing for us to continue the work, being the hands and feet of Christ, creating opportunities. I really appreciate the emphasis given to creating educational opportunities for all. This is a way to change the world, to lift societies and bring us together as humanity. And so this evening, well, it's evening here, but this symposium has been very, very encouraging, and I give warm thanks to everyone involved.
Thank you. Thank you. And we would like to close this session. And it was a pleasure hosting this session. And because, whenever such a thing, when I, in a forum like this, when we all talk and we all share, so at that time, I actually feel the bond becoming stronger. We have a shared responsibility, we have a shared goal, and the mission field is also shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Masi, for hosting and facilitating the open discussion. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time, just slightly over. I would now like to invite Dr. Shew to share closing remarks.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you in my closing remarks to everyone who has made this symposium possible. John Goucher has been a particular theme of interest for me for many, many years, and I am delighted to have this chance to share the space with both Marilyn Warshawski as well as John So, and to talk about him. And I want to thank everyone else who helped in other ways to put this together. Youngmin Pike was very important behind the scenes. All of the members of the APAME Board of Directors. Thank you for Dr. Masi for leading the discussion today. It's really a group effort. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shew, for your remarks. And to conclude, we are honored to have Bishop Emerito Nakpil, Bishop of the United Methodist Church and a member of the APAME Board of Directors, to lead us in the closing prayer.
May I just say a word or two? I read a keynote address by one of the business tycoons in our country this morning. My attention, I caught what I caught in the keynote address is one sentence. And the sentence says, people are defined by the future they create. The legacy that we are now celebrating from John Franklin Goucher was a future created by them. And so our memorials define them in terms of the future that they have created for us. If we are going to continue the legacy that they have built, might we not also create a new future? So that not only those who had gone before us are defined by the future they create, but precisely by what we can do in creating a new future for education in a secular age. And let us hope that God will help us, as He did help Jesus, create a new creation for all the world. Let us pray. Father, the source of possibility is you. And it comes to us as a future we can dream of and plan for. And so we are participants in the creation of new and different things that will endure and become legacy for others to nourish. May you bless the legacy that we now have memorialized and make it a part of a new future that we can create for the glory of your name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.